Hello. Now, never really done one of these live videos before, so it's a whole new concept for me. So I'm just going to hang about for a few minutes, see who else joins. I did say 7 o'clock and I don't think it's quite 7 yet. Some people might not recognise me if you really just only watch my videos and you don't know me in real life. I don't have any music blaring out behind me all the time, and I also wear glasses, so you might not recognise me. I'll just wait a few minutes just in case anybody else joins. But yeah, tonight this is the first time I've gone live, so you know, please let me know what you think. But if I do, you know, break down in tears, crumpled up in a ball at the back of the room, then you'll know what's happened. I've just had a nervous breakdown or something like that. But yeah, tonight I want to talk about something different than what's kind of filling our TV screens at the moment, and let's get a wee bit of escape from that. And also, what I want this video to do is give you some ideas, some books that you can hopefully go away and read after tonight. A lot of people do ask me, what books do you read? I've got all these films out, and people are asking me what books I read. So tonight I'm going to go through some of my favourite books. I'll just hang on for a couple of minutes because there seems to be a couple of other people joining. Is that 4,000 people now? I think the video will be still up on Facebook afterwards as well if you want to watch it, but yeah, I'll be there forever. So we'll give it a few minutes. This is not scripted in any way, so I might stumble my way through it. Hopefully not, because it's my favourite subject and I do know, I talk about it all the time. Okay, what time is it? I'm not going to watch it. Must be a few minutes past now. Okay, I'm just going to start. So, books on the Scottish borders. The most famous author to come from the Scottish borders was obviously Sir Walter Scott, wasn't it? Sir Walter Scott has written tons of books about the Scottish borders. And what Sir Walter did was he took the oral tradition of this land and put it down into text, and he highly romanticised it and made the Scottish borders sound like this amazingly fantastical, romantic place full of goblins and ghosts and heroes and villains and fair maidens and all that sort of stuff, and really made people want to come to the Scottish borders. So my favourite books are not Sir Walter Scott ones, because his language is too old and I find it very, very difficult to read his books. But my favourite books are all kind of that ilk. There are textbooks, university style textbooks, which delve into the finer details of Scottish borders history, and sometimes I do consult these books, but more often than not, the books that I read and I enjoy are the ones that have a bit of story, a bit of imagination, a bit of colourful language, and really, really bring the area to life, which is what I try to do. So some of the purists out there might disagree with some of my choices, I don't know, but let's go through them anyway. So it's my top 8, so I'm not doing a top 10, I'm going a bit maverick, top 10s are yesterday's news, aren't they? So, number 8, and my number 8 book on the list is this, The Highland Clearances by Peter Aitchison and Andrew Caskill. Why is this on my list? Because it's the only book really that you can find that deals with this amazingly important subject. Now you look for books on the Highland Clearances and they're all over the place. It's an absolute deluge of books telling you about the Highland Clearances. It's this event which is really in the psyche of the Scottish people, the Highland Clearances, yeah? But the Lowland Clearances are never talked about. This is probably the only book that you'll find about it. But the Lowland Clearances were just as bad as the Highland Clearances. Maybe not quite so violent, but they really do. This book really does open your eyes to the fact that the Scottish borders here has not always been this huge tract of agriculture and livestock. It really was stuffed full of little villages and towns, but everybody who lived on those little villages and towns was forced out, either into the big towns and cities of Scotland or forced abroad. Forced immigration to Canada and the United States and Australia and places like that. And it really was a terrible time. And that's why this book is in my list, because it really is the only one. Nobody talks about the Lowland Clearances, apart from Peter Aitchison, Andrew Caskill and me. So this must be on your reading list. If you've not read it, read it. It is a bit dry at times, and it does focus a bit on Dumfries and Galloway, but well worth reading. So number 8, the Lowland Clearances. Okay, number 7. This one is quite a new book, and it's one which divides quite a lot of opinion, because a lot of people don't like it because the guy who wrote it is an incomer. Dare I say it, he's English. He's an Englishman who's moved into the Scottish borders, and he's written this book, and it's called The Debatable Lands, or The Debatable Land even. And it's about this tract of land down near the English border, which was never Scottish or English. It was this no man's land in the middle there for centuries. And what this guy, Graham Robb, does is he really puts a whole new perspective on this debatable land, really brings it to life as well, because it's where he was living. But let me just read you a quick excerpt from the book. The debatable land was an independent territory which used to exist between Scotland and England. At the height of its notoriety, it was the bloodiest region in Great Britain, fought over by Henry VIII, Elizabeth I and James V. After the union of the crowns, most of its population was slaughtered or deported, and it became the last part of the country to be brought under control of the state. Today, its history has been forgotten or ignored. And this guy, Graham Robb, really does bring it to life. And I would really, really suggest reading this book. Now, like I say, a lot of people don't like it. A lot of purists might slate me for liking this one, but go for it. It's really good. Anyway, next one. Number 6. Number 6 is this one. The Haunted Borders by Norrie MacLeish. I don't know Norrie MacLeish, but I think he's still going about. I think he's maybe got something to do with the Jedburgh Historical Society. But there are tons and tons of books written on ghost stories and goblins and witches and all that sort of stuff through the Scottish borders. But a lot of them, I need to be honest, a lot of them are a load of rubbish. But this one by Norrie MacLeish, he really, really does nail it. It's fantastic. And all the stories that he talks about and the sites that he talks about are still ones that you can go and visit today. And that's what really brought it to life for me. I went through this entire book, and most of the stories in there, I've then went and visited the site, and it really, really does bring it to life. So I would really, really recommend this one. The best story for me, and the one that really, really got me, was the Foul Ford. The Mystery of the Foul Ford. It stands about 50 yards off the West Strother Road, just beside the track that wends its way across the desolate moorlands that stretch beyond the Berwickshire town of Greenlaw. It is a rough-hewn, upright stone in a small hollow with no inscription to explain why it is there. It is not an ancient stone, but was obviously placed with some purpose in mind. I had long been intrigued when I first came across it, but it was to take many years before I managed to discover the strange and eerie tale behind the stone's presence on the bleak foothills of the Lammermuirs. Now, if that's not an invitation to go and find out what it was about, and Norrie's done a massive bit of research on that standing stone that stands in the middle of nowhere, and it turns out that people were dying there, and it was this really, really eerie place. And I went and found it, and we made a film on it. It was a Christmas film. But yeah, Norrie's book, The Haunted Borders, fantastic. The best ghost story book you'll get about the borders. So if anybody knows Norrie, tell them that it was on my list. That was number 6. So all good ones so far. Number 5. So you can't do a top 8 books about the Scottish borders without having something in there about the border reavers. And for me, this is the best book. The Reavers by Alistair Moffat. Now there are plenty books about the border reavers, and the other one, the kind of go-to book about the border reavers that most people talk about is this one, The Steel Bonnets. There's a guy called George MacDonald Fraser, The Steel Bonnets. But for me, The Steel Bonnets is just a bit too long and in-depth, whereas this one, The Reavers by Alistair Moffat, is fantastic. Really hits the nail on the head, brings out the essence of the whole reaving times, gives you the main stories, and you really get to know what's happening there. And his language is a bit more colourful and more intriguing and enthralling than the Steel Bonnets for me. So if you're looking for an introduction to the Border Reavers, or if you know a bit and you want to know a bit more, then this is the one for me, the Reavers by Alistair Moffat. Now Alistair's wrote a lot of books about the Scottish borders, and he's a border man himself, so that adds an extra element to it. But I'll just read you. This is the final passage of the book, which might ruin it for you, but family counted for everything in the reaving centuries, and in an alienated, fragmented urban world that is also attractive. My name is Little Jock Elliot was more than a boast. It described a way of life. It is almost gone now. The riding surnames are only a unique and fascinating memory. The Reavers have melted into the moonlit landscape, and their grey shapes fading into the darkness of the past. But the names have endured, and the Borderers have made other, better marks on history. All of these ancient qualities of bravery, dash, cheek and independent strength of will and mind seek to coalesce in the greatest foray ever run. Neil Armstrong rode the moonlight like none of his reaving ancestors when he reached out and touched it. There you go. What an ending to a book. But it's a fantastic book, that one. And if you want an introduction to the Border Reavers, this is the book. Again, sets you on a path looking for these towers and places in the landscape, so it really is well worth reading. So that was my number 5. Number 4. Number 4 is 2 books. And the reason that I've chosen 2 books for number 4 is because it's 2 books that deal with the same subject. And they both deal with the same subject from totally independent stances. I'm pretty, almost 100% sure that Alistair Moffat and August Hunt, the 2 authors, wrote these books completely independently and never used any of the other person's literature as resource. But the 2 books deal with the same subject, and that subject is King Arthur. King Arthur in the Scottish borders. Would you believe it? If you watch my films, you probably would. But if you're like me and most people in the world, you're probably brought up to believe that King Arthur is this man who existed in Cornwall or Devon or Wales or somewhere in the south of England, and the whole myth and legend of King Arthur has really grown arms and legs, and he's become a literary and Hollywood legend that nobody knows. People don't even think he's real, but he was real. And if you read these 2 books, they both come to almost identical conclusions about the reality of King Arthur, which was that he survived here in the Scottish and English borderlands, and used to roam the land between Hadrian's Wall and Edinburgh. And these 2 guys have both put tons and tons of research into this subject, and you really need to read these 2 books because, like I say, they both make you really think King Arthur was Scottish. And I'm pretty convinced now. Now, I've not read many books about him living in Cornwall and all the rest of it. I'm sure they're pretty convincing too. But Arthur by Alistair Moffat, again, is pretty, colourful language. He really brings it to life. He does make a few differences to August Hunt, because in this one, Alistair Moffat says that Roxburgh Castle was Camelot, which is a pretty big claim, but you can see it, and if you read it, you really can. I can believe it. And in this one, August Hunt makes a great case for Bruff on Sands down by Carlisle. Bruff on Sands by Carlisle, which is right at the end of Hadrian's Wall, and he makes a fantastic claim for that being Avalon. Now, Avalon, the Isle of Avalon, which is kind of just assumed to be Glastonbury down in the south of England. But if you read August Hunt, and August Hunt is pretty dry and very, very critical and analytical, and his language isn't very, very colourful, but he's done tons of research. And if you read this guy, Hadrian's Wall and Avalon, and if you read this guy, Alistair Moffat, Camelot at Roxburgh Castle, it all comes to life. And also the wizard Merlin being in the borders. And I've done tons of researching and digging on this since reading these 2 books, but read them both. Get both stories from 2 different spectrums of society, somebody in the Scottish borders, somebody down in London, and you will believe, like me, that King Arthur survived here in the Scottish borders and Hadrian's Wall. So there you go, number 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Number 3. Number 3 is another one where I've picked 2 books. So 2 books together to form my fourth choice. And the reason that I picked these two books is because they're both by the same author, and his name is David Ross. And David Ross is this biker who kind of travels around Scotland and England and writes these stories, and he's fantastic. I love his books, and he's a real Scottish patriot as well, you know. But sadly, you know, a couple of years ago I thought, yeah, I'm going to get in touch with David R. Ross, and I tried to get in touch with him through YouTube and email and stuff, but sadly he passed away a couple of years ago due to a heart attack or something like that. So yeah, really sad. But David R. Ross, you know, if any David R. Ross's ever family or friends ever see this, you know, I just want you to know that he's been a fantastic influence on my films over the years. But his two books are both about Scottish heroes, and two Scottish heroes who survived and lived in the Scottish borderlands, which not many people know or talk about. And the first one is this guy, my favourite character from history. And it's James the Good, the Black Douglas. The Black Douglas. Scotland's fiercest ever warrior, the man of England's nightmares. The man who has been completely forgotten about in Scotland and the Scottish borders. He lived in Jedburgh. You know, he lived in Jedburgh. And we don't even talk about him. This is the guy who led Robert the Bruce's army and assault on the English in the early 1300s and basically won the first Scottish Wars of Independence for us. The guy was an absolute legend. You don't hear anything about him. There is a statue of him somewhere in Edinburgh, but I couldn't even find it. I thought it would be in Edinburgh Castle. It's not in Edinburgh Castle. Edinburgh Castle's just full of pomp, royalness, you know, James V, James IV, Queen Mary, Queen whatever. Oh nonsense. This is the guy who's the real Scottish hero, the Black Douglas. Just read you a wee bit. Sir James the Good, one of the finest soldiers Scotland ever produced, is better known by the name given to him by the English, the Black Douglas. And they gave him this name with some justification. He terrified the northern shires of England throughout the King Robert the Bruce's years of War of Independence. I feel that the people of Scotland should know more about this remarkable man, and although I wrote of him in my book On the Trail of Robert the Bruce, he really deserves a book dedicated solely to him. Couldn't agree more, David, and that's why I've dedicated so many films to him. And they've all been very popular as well because people love this guy, they love the story of the Black Douglas. But this is one of the only books that you'll find about the Black Douglas too, but it's pretty comprehensive. It travels every one of the Black Douglas's battles in Scotland and England, and if you really want to, you can follow it on the land, just like I've done. So really great. And the second book that David Ross has wrote, same sort of format, he follows in the footsteps of these guys and gives you real sites that you can go and tour and cover on the ground, you know. But the second guy is none other than William Wallace. Who else? Scotland's greatest ever patriot. A man who almost 900 years after his death still provokes debate and raging arguments across the whole of Scotland. You know, I get more comments and more criticism about my films about William Wallace than I do about anybody else. There's so many people want to slate this guy, this charismatic character who inspired so much love and passion and patriotism and still does. Deserves respect in my mind, whatever he was. But yeah, William Wallace. My films about William Wallace have been some of the most popular ones that I've done, and like I say, they do provoke lots and lots and lots of comments. And if you want to take me on and negative about William Wallace, you know, please come ahead, because you know I get everything thrown at me, and the one that I really get thrown at me all the time is, "You've watched too much Braveheart. You've watched too much Braveheart. Come on, surely you can do better than that." There was one that I'd done not too long ago. I was up Tala Reservoir. Really is the middle of nowhere up at Tala, and we'd done lots of research on this castle that Wallace had potentially stayed in or used as a hideout during the Wars of Independence in the Ettrick Forest, and we found the foundation of a castle, and it took us ages to do the research, but we found it. We found this castle, and the comments were still coming in saying, "You've watched too much Braveheart. What part of Braveheart is Wallace hiding in a castle up Tala Reservoir?" I tell you, you know, that's the sort of nonsense these people are talking about. It's just all politicised, highly politicised these days. But William Wallace spent most of his time during the Wars of Independence in the Scottish borders, and you can really trace his footsteps on the map, because there's Wallace and place names all over the place in the Scottish borders. Hawick, Meagle Hill near Galashiels, Roxburgh, the Minchmuir, he's all over the place. Not to mention the big statue of him down at Bemerside, which was put up in the 1800s, long before Mel Gibson was even born. So these two come in as my number 3 choice, and they're both by David Ross, who sadly passed away. But On the Trail of William Wallace and The Black Douglas. And you can go with these books as a tour guide and follow them on the ground, and that's why they're so good. There you go. Okay, number 2. My number 2 book is this one. Selkirkshire and the Borders by Walter Elliot. Now, if you don't know who Walter Elliot is, Walter's a guy through the Scottish borders. He's a bit older now. He was a fencer. You know, he worked as a fencer in the Scottish borders, putting up fences in the fields. And for that job as a fencer, what he used to do was use divining rods. So the divining rods would help him find old fence holes in the ground. So instead of digging a new bit of ground, which was hard and labour intensive, the divining rods helped him to find old fence holes, which made his job far easier. But Walter has this intense, passionate love of Scottish borders history and the Scottish borders, and he adapted his divining fencing technique to become a history technique, an archaeology technique. So he has wrote another book which is called Divining Archaeology. But what Walter does is he really dissects the land of the borders with these divining rods, and he comes up with stuff that people didn't even know about or think about. And he takes places like Trimontium, the Roman fort, and really gets inside them and tells you exactly where things are, exactly where posts are, and really puts a whole new perspective on Scottish borders history. It's really quite miraculous the things that Walter finds. Now, he's not very well, you know, in the historical community, if you like, or the real, the academic community. A lot of his work is shunned because divining is this mysterious, mystical, hocus pocus thing which has never really been proven as real. But all the stuff that Walter finds usually does become reality whenever any proper research is done on it. But I trust the stuff that he finds 100%, because all of it is true, and it's really fascinating, and the way he puts it across is just amazing. He's done a lot of other work in the borders, Walter. I mean, he was a massive part of the whole excavation and database and part of the Trimontium site down in the Roman camp down at Melrose. But this book, Selkirkshire and the Borders, from the beginning of time to 1603 AD. 1603 AD is the time of the Union of the Crowns. But really, there's so much in this book, really you need to read it about 3 times, and every one of the sites you can go and visit and think, wow, that was really there. But just to give you a kind of example of the sort of things that Walter talks about. So there's a stone in the Yarrow Valley, which is an ancient stone. I reckon it's 3rd century or something like that, But what Walter does, he goes further. He takes the divining rods there and down there, and he tells you exactly what's going on down there. In the field immediately to the east of the Yarrow stone, that's the standing stone that you can see, there is a rectangular cemetery with loosely packed graves laid out in 10 rows, aligned approximately east-west and enclosed by a double palisade. The foundations of a stone-based building measuring 9 metres by 5 metres internally, with an apse end on its east side, lie to the west of the cemetery. And this is stuff that he's just finding out, these divining rods. And that's how detailed he gets, and it's just amazing the things that he uncovers. I think Walter he must have watched a few of my videos, because through a mutual friend he sent me these books and signed them for me, which was really, I was honoured to get them, and I'd love to meet the man at some point. But I've never met him yet. But he brings to life other things that people never talk about. Now, Selkirk is a place with a lot of history, and you think about the Common Ridings and the Battle of Flodden and all that sort of stuff. Selkirk's really got famous history. But Walter talks about Selkirk history, things that I never knew about. Selkirk Castle. I didn't even know there was a castle in Selkirk, and you think, yeah, he must be surmising there. He's seen a mound and he's just making it up. But no, what Walter's done is he's dug into the records as well, and Selkirk Castle was heavily documented by the English who built it. Well, they redone it, or they done a lot of the building work on it, so it's highly documented and detailed, all the work that went on at Selkirk Castle. So this is from September 1302. Work on the new castle of Selkirk was so rapid that by the 14th, that's how detailed it is, by the 14th of September 1302, it was reported that the tower of the fortress of Selkirk is finished, except for the roof, from the shortage of planks, and a postern is made out of the tower to the west, where there is a stone facing, a drawbridge, and a portcullis, together with a good gallery above, and the stonework of the same drawbridge is half finished, and 14 perches of the peel, in this case an enclosing fence made from wood, are made from one part of the tower. There are 14 perches yet to make, and the stonework of the chief gate of the fortress is raised above the level of the ground to the drawbridge. It's like a detailed modern day building document, you know, about Selkirk Castle, which I didn't even know existed. So really, you know, to read Walter's book, Selkirkshire and the Borders, from from the beginning of time to 1603, this is the best one. Then he does another volume as well from 1603 to the present day. But this one here for me is so fascinating, the stuff that Walter brings up that nobody else talks about. Nobody in historical community, I don't know what the historical community means, but anybody who at university certainly wouldn't be using Walter's information, because it's all done by divining and by knowledge on the ground, you know, walking about on the ground. That's how I get half of my knowledge, you know, just walking about on the ground. You see things that people never read about. Anyway, that is my top 7. So my last book, my top book, my favourite book on the Scottish Borders, and it's one that I've read countless times, and every time I read it I get another snippet of information, or another one sentence that just sends me off on another tangent and finds another whole video. And it's one, you know, everyone that I've talked about so far, you can probably just go on Amazon. We'll try and put a link up on all of them. You can probably just go on Amazon and buy them. Whereas this one, the last one, you might be a bit harder to get because it's a bit old. And what book is it? It's this. Brave Borderland by H. Drummond Gould. I don't even know who H. Drummond Gould was, you know. I'd love to know, you know, I'd love to find out if he's got family or anything like that still lives in the area. So if anybody does know, please tell me. But H. Drummond Gould, this book is absolute gem of a book on the Scottish Borders. It's heavily romanticised, His language is extremely colourful, but he's opened my eyes to stuff that I would never ever have known about. I've never ever seen in any other books. Things like, I don't know, Hobbyker's Cave, all these little battle sites that they've still got stones and stuff lying there. Caves. He was the first man that introduced me to caves. I didn't know there was caves in the Scottish Borders, but H. Drummond Gould introduces you to all that stuff. Let me just give you a snippet. Here's his introduction. And he's talking about the time after the Scottish Wars of Independence here. The outnumbering armies with which aggressors continued to assail these districts were calculated to overwhelm all resistance and subjugate the land. But in spite of their utmost endeavours throughout the long centuries, they failed to achieve their objective, a result due to the courage, hardihood of the Scottish marchmen and the brave blades who ably supported them. Scotland stood secure behind the borders. So yeah, he really is very biased. I think he must be a Scottish borderer, but he's really biased towards the Scottish Borders. But that's good. That's a good place to come from. And his language is really colourful, but he gets into all these little nooks and crannies of history that I just never would have known about. And you don't read about them anywhere else. You know, you go away researching them, and the only place you can research them is by going on foot to the places that he talks about to find them. And that's what I've done. Okay. So he goes all the way from Berwick, Carlisle. You know, he talks about the real borderlands. People often pull me up and say, oh, you know, Carlisle's not on the Scottish Borders. And I'm like, do you really think I don't know that? We're talking about the borderlands. These are all real constituent parts of the borderland. Carlisle, Berwick, places further down in Northumberland, you know, Durham even Durham played an integral part of the borderlands and the growth. And Drummond does talk about these places, but he really is in the heart of his story is in the Scottish Borders. Another thing that he talks about a lot is Hadrian's Wall, which is another hugely important part of the Scottish Borders and the English borderlands. It's this you know, it's the biggest Roman archaeological site in the world, and it still is to this day. And it's just, if you've never been to Hadrian's Wall, you need to go. It's just an absolutely amazing place. And this is how Drummond describes it at the end of his passage on the Hadrian's Wall. This passage was about the god Mithras, by the way, which is where I got my information for that film too. But here he goes. Tonight there is only the ruined wall, and the weeping wind and an eerie glamour rolling towards northwards into the dusk, out of which comes a pee-weep's cry, faint and far, like a lonely spirit calling across the gap of the vanished centuries to the broken bastion wall. It really does give you that sense of place and that sense of being there, and then you need to go to Hadrian's Wall to see these places. But I can't praise this book enough, and I'm sure people would slate it, because he talks about folklore as if it was fact. So one of the ones he talks about is William Wallace. There's a street in Berwick upon Tweed called Wallace Green, and what Drummond does is he talks about Wallace Green as being the place where Wallace's right arm, because when Wallace was killed or executed in London, he was quartered. His head was put on a spike in London, and then his 4 quarters were sent to different castles in Scotland as a warning to the Scottish people. And his right arm and torso apparently was sent to Berwick upon Tweed, and it was hung on Berwick Castle. But when it was brought down, they reckon it was buried in this place which is now known as Wallace Green. This became a place of worship and pilgrimage for the few Scottish people that weren't murdered, that lived in Berwick upon Tweed, and this is why it was called Wallace Green. And Drummond talks about that quite matter-of-factly. But people, modern historians, especially English ones from Berwick upon Tweed, completely and utterly slate that idea, and they won't have it. They can't tell you why it's called Wallace Green, but they can definitely tell you that it wasn't because of that. But I think that Drummond is onto something. Word of mouth, half-truths, folklore, these things that are passed down through the centuries are sometimes far more reliable than scraps of archaeology or written notes that are sometimes written by biased men, even however long ago they were written. So yeah, that is my number 1 book on the Scottish border. So if you do want to get it, good luck, because it is quite old. I think mine's is signed by somebody in 1935. So it must have been, I think it was just printed a couple of years before that. So it's an old book. And at the start, I'll just read this quick Roger Quinn poem at the start. This is Drummond H. Gould's opening is a Roger Quinn poem. Roger Quinn was a poet I think he was from Edinburgh, but he lived in Galashiels, I think. From the moorland and the meadows to the city of the shadows. This is when he moved from the borders back to Edinburgh. From the moorland and the meadows to the city of the shadows, where I wander old and lonely, comes the call I understand. In clear soft tones enthralling, it's calling, calling, calling. 'Tis the spirit of the open from the dear old borderland. Quite evocative, isn't it? And that's Drummond's introduction to this book. So there you go, that's my top 8 books of the Scottish border. So hope you enjoyed it, hope you can get a hold of some of them and read them, and I'll let you go, and you can now go and start watching news again about that bug that everybody's getting, or hopefully not getting. Thank you for watching, bye.